Okay, we left off last time, ladies and gentlemen, with the letter Yud, and so let me just go over just one or two words about what we did so far. What we did was to take the Hebrew letters in transcription and basically give you where the sounds are produced, beginning with the bilabial letters, the B letter, the P letter, the M letter, the W letter, then working ourselves all the way back into the throat, where we have the so-called laryngeals, the four laryngeals, the aleph letter, the ayin, then the hey, the equivalent of an H, and the H with a dot under it, the hush sound, the Hebrew word, the Hebrew letter known as the het letter. And then we began to write out the Hebrew letters themselves, which we did 10 of them. And the letters again, as I write them on the board, letter Aleph, letter Bet, and the equivalent of the letter Bet without a dot in it called the Bet letter, then the Gimel, and then the Dalet, whereas Edna does not make a distinction between the two letters, the Gimel with a dot and the Gimel without the dot, the Dalet with the dot, the Dalet without the dot. We did, and I'll get back to these three letters a little later with another aspect of Hebrew phonemes or Hebrew sounds once we finish writing out the Hebrew alphabet. But if you want to be more complete than the book itself, have the second letter Bet, also known as the Vet, the Gimel with a dot, the Gimel without a dot, the Dalet with a dot, the Dalet without the dot. Looking at Edna's book on page 2, which has a table of consonants, she does not bother to show you the Gimel and the Dalet with and without the dots. She does with the Bet and the Vet. The reason is Edna is concerned more with Israeli reading or pronunciation, I should say, and the Israelis no longer make a distinction of the Gimel that's plosive with the dot and the Gimel that's not plosive with the dot. As far as academic scholars are concerned, they make the distinction by writing the Gimel with the dot as a G. The Gimel without the dot, they'll put a G with a line under it, suggesting this is a continuant G sound, or they'll write just simply GH. The same thing is true with the Dalet. They'll write a D, and they'll write a D with a line under it, or DH to imply the Dalet without the dot. But Israeli phonetic Hebrew doesn't have that concern, so she doesn't really deal with it that way. The next letter, the fifth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, is called the Hey letter. Hey letter sounds like your English exclamation, hey, as in hey you. It has nothing to do with hey you at all. It's just the name of that letter is called the Hey. And notice how I write the Hey, an outside curve and an inside curve. The transcription of the Hey letter is the letter H. And then the Vav letter is pronounced as a V sound, the same as the Vet sound is today. But back in the day, the Vav letter was a W sound. So when it comes to where is the sound produced, it is not a V production as you have with the V letter as labial dental, but this is a bilabial letter since originally the sound was a wah, a W that's been lost in Hebrew today. Then you go on with the seventh letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the Zion letter, the Het letter, the Tet letter, and the last letter we talked about was the Yud letter. I made several comments about each one of these letters. So, for example, the Zion letter is the same name, the word Zion, for the Hebrew or male member of a human body, or anybody for that matter, animals as well. And what's the connection between a Zion as a genital marker or a genital figure of a body versus the Hebrew letter Zion? You certainly don't see any connection in appearance. But if you look at the printed letter Zion and you have an imagination, it looks like a pedal erection. And then the letter Het, for example. When you transcribe the Het, it's normally with an H and a dot under it, or what you have in popular transcription, a CH. And that gets confused with the next letter we're going to show you in a few moments. The Tet letter, again, the transcription is a T with a dot under it. And today it's pronounced the same way as the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is transcribed as a T, a Tav letter. So a number of these letters no longer have their own distinctive sound. They are said the same way as another phoneme is. And the question I raised last time is why not get rid of these letters if they no longer have their own distinctive sound? And the reason is Hebrew literature, Hebrew writing, whatever, over hundreds, if not a couple of thousand years, have used these letters distinctively as their own letter. And they did not get confused with another letter. The confusion is our development of the language over the centuries. So you keep it in place. I also mentioned in English, you have a similar problem. The letter C, the letter X have no functions on their own. They have the same sound as other sounds of English. But we leave the letter C and we leave the letter X in its place when you spell words out. For example, if I say the word zero, the proper spelling of zero in English is Z-E-R-O, but the X has no sound to it. It's an S-E, zero, zero, zero. No, maybe it's a Z. It's a Z, yeah. See how confused I just got? It does sound. Yeah. In any case, the X letter doesn't have its own distinctive sound anymore.
Continue. I'm going to check the time because I got to check it on this.
Okay. Can I continue?
Continue.
Anyway, as we now continue, the next letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the letter Kaf. As you look at the particular chart on page 2, or if you have something else guiding you, the Kaf letter. The Kaf letter is written this way. It's also written this way. So it joins that group so far of the Bet, the Vet, the Gimel, the Dalet, the Dalet, and now we have the Kaf and the Kaf. And we'll get back to these so-called letters that have a dot and without the dot and what to make of them soon. In any case, the Kaf letter, the transcription of the Kaf letter is basically the letter K, and without that particular dot in it, it goes as a K with a line under it, or some people simply put a KH. In any case, the sound is a K sound, a Kaf letter. And it's going to be confusions with another letter soon, the Kaf letter. And then the Kaf letter has another problem about it. Not only does it have a counterpart, a Haf, the Kaf letter is written differently if it's the last letter of a Hebrew word. There are a number of Hebrew letters which are written differently if they're in the frontal or medial part of the word compared to when they occur as the last letter of the word. And that we will do as another subunit when we finish the alphabet. The Kaf letter numerical value is the number 20. Keep in mind what we have is Hebrew letters have numerical values to them. And so the first 10 letters are numbers 1 through 10. And in the numbers 11 through 19, you take the letter Yud, that's the number 10, and then you add the number Aleph, that's Yud Aleph, that's 11, Yud Bet, that's 12, Yud Gimel, that's 13, Yud Dalet, that's 14, and then Yud Hey should be the number 15. Now notice the problem. Yud Hey by itself is also synonymous with another reference to Hashem, to God as God is God. And so there is a prohibition among religious Jews in particular not to write out anything at all that seems to suggest the very name of God's essence. So the Yud Hey by itself is the word for the Lord, as in the phrase Hallelujah, praise the Lord. So Jews will avoid writing Yud Hey, and what they'll do is they'll take the number 9 and add the number 6 to it, and that also equals 15. But they avoid the Yud Hey. Then the number 16 is Yud and Vav, and that also is a problem. Why so? Because the 4-letter name of the Lord, as we say in English, the Lord, the word Elohim is God, and Yud Hey Vav Hey, Hashem, is the Lord. You have Yud Hey Vav Hey. You notice I have a Yud and a Vav. These are 2 of the 4 letters of the Yud Hey Vav Hey. And so we avoid that by writing number 16, by taking the number 9 and now adding a Zion to it. So 9 plus 7 equals 16. So please note that when it comes to numbers 15 and 16, instead of using the letter Yud, we use a tet, 9, and then we add 6 to it. or in this case 7 to it, to get across 15, get across 16. And then you continue. Number 17 is Yud Zion, no problem with the divine name. And then Yud Chet is number 18. And Yud Chet represents another issue. There's nothing divine about the Yud Chet. The Yud, the Hey, the Vav, the Hey. I see a Yud here, but I don't see any Heys or Vavs following it. So it's not an issue. But what the Yud Chet represents is reversing the two letters. The number 18, if I spell it with a Chet first and then a Yud, I get 8 and 10, like I get with Yud and Chet, a 10 and 8. In both cases, they equal number 18. But when you have a Chet and Yud put together this way, it spells out the word for life. And it is a tradition, particularly among Ashkenazim, to use that high reference to represent living, life, Judaism to the fullest, and whatever. It's not uncommon for a Jewish charm around the neck to have a Star of David, two triangles superimposed upon each other in opposite direction, or to have the word high, life. And when Jews give charity, the amounts they give is not by number 1 or 5 or 10, but they give it in numbers of 18. Ashkenazim Jews will give charity tzedakah in amounts of 18. Once high, twice high, 3 times high, 4 times high. That's how they do it in a public gathering. The Sfaradim don't do number high. What they do is they take the numerical value of the 4-letter name of God. So the Yud is the number 10, the Hey is 5, that's 15, the Vav is, Yud Hey is 15, the Vav, I guess, is 6, that's 21, Yud Hey, Vav Hey, and then the Hey that follows 21 makes it 26. So 26 is the numerical value of the Yud Hey, Vav Hey, the Lord's name. And Sfaradim give charity in the amounts of 26, 26, 26, 26. One has the divine reference, Sfaradim, 26. The other has human existence, Natsalia, the number of life, the number for life, and hence high. And the number 19 is Yud and Tet, no problem here. When it comes to 20, you pick up with the next letter following the 10th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is the letter Kaf. Kaf represents the number 20. And so when you want to say 21, it's Kaf Aleph, Kaf Bet, Kaf Gimel, Kaf Dalet. 25 is Kaf Hey, Kaf Vav is 26, Kaf Zion is 27, and then you have a special number with 28. Again, I'm just using letters to represent numbers. The letter Kaf is 20, Het is 8. So what's special about 28? 28, without seeing it in the form of a numerology, represents the Hebrew word koach. Koach is the word for power. And so you have, I guess, organizations that deal with the highlighting of power, strength, of a gun in hand or rifle in hand, which is one of the earliest images of the pre-state movements of Israel's independence, with a hand with a raised rifle, and the phrase underneath, only this way, rakach, playing upon the phrase, the word thus. If I take my Kaf letter and the final way of writing that Kaf letter, which you don't know yet, that's the Hebrew word for thus. And a fist closed around a rifle gives the impression this is the way you get freedom, only this way, by this way. But it's a play upon the sound of koach, power. And then 29 is Kaf Lamed. 29 is Kaf Lamed. As I continue with my alphabet letters, the letter Lamed now follows. And following that is the letter Mem. And following that is the letter Nun. Numerical value 30, 40, and 50. The Lamed, if you will, is the L sound. The M is an M sound. The Mem is an M sound. The Nun is an N sound. And go back over your syllabic chart, the way I broke the words into where sounds are produced. The L letter and the N letter are two of the three liquid letters. The N letter, the phonetic sound of ma, is a bilabial. And then when it comes to numbers, again, you repeat the system. Lamed Aleph is 31. Lamed Bet is 32. Lamed Gimel, Lamed Daled, Lamed Hey, and then you have a special number, Lamed Vav. Lamed Vav transliterates, or equates rather, to number 36. The number 36 is a special number within Jewish memory. It's associated with tzaddikim, with the righteous ones. How come? I don't know. It just is. And so we're told that if someone's called a Lamed Vav Nick, adding the word Nick, a member of that group of the Lamed Vav, you're seen as somebody who's very saintly, somebody special, somebody outstanding, because of who you are, what you've done, how you contributed. And the Lamed Vavnik does not just simply come from any person or any genealogy or any group. It's from every person, every place, anywhere in this world. The Lamed Vavniks are not quote unquote Jews alone, if they are even Jews. Righteous, unusual, outstanding individuals are found in every place, everywhere, every gender, and whatever. That's what makes this thing so fascinating. And when you want to give respect to someone, you say, you're a Lamed Vavnik. The Lamed Vavnik doesn't even know he is a Lamed Vavnik. That's the mystery of all this. And then we're told when a Lamed Vavnik dies of natural death or of decreed death, such as being killed in war, at that very second, at that very moment, a baby cries again. A new baby is born. The next Lamed Vavnik has entered this world. The world will never be, at any moment, at any time, without the 36. And then you continue. Lamed Zayin is 37, Lamed Chet is 38, Lamed Tet is 39, and then you get to the Mem letter, number 40. And so you repeat the whole system again. And then when you finish with the Mem letter, you get to number 50. The number 50 is the Nun. So Nun Aleph, Nun Bet, Nun Gimel, and so on and so forth. As I'm double checking the chart, Edna Coffin is not at all restrictive here. She has by each one of the Hebrew letters its numerical value. By the letter Nun, she has number 50. Then she goes on to number 60 and 70 and 80 and 90. The number 60, she calls it the Samech letter. And she writes the word Samech in English as S-A-M-E-X. So in other words, what she does is she takes the letter Kaf at the end and she makes it as an X marker. I do not. And I guess what I'm going to do is call that to your attention when we do the 6 letters. That you have to see what I have to do. Anyway, let's continue. The Samech letter. The Samech letter. The Samech letter is number 60. And as you write the number 60 in Hebrew out, notice the problem that's done. Most people who know how to write Hebrew will go in this direction, will go in this direction. Others who are not familiar with Hebrew go in this direction, this direction. The question is, what's the big deal? At the end, the Samech letter looks like your letter O of English, looks like your numerical value of a 0. Isn't that the result? And so what's the big deal how you make it? The big deal is when you're starting to write Hebrew, to get used to going from right to left as much as you can, rather than from left to right. So going in this direction, that's the more Hebraic way of writing. Going in this direction, that's more the English way of writing. So try to make your samech like this. If it's a difficult thing to remember, then just write your 0 the way you normally do. When you do a 0, you don't do a 0 in that direction, you do it in this direction. The Samech letter, numerical value, is 60. The transliteration of the Samech is the letter S. And the letter S, as you might remember from the phonetic chart, is one of the 5 sibilant letters. The S with a marker like this, the S with a marker like this, the S with a dot underneath it, and the Zion at the end, and these are your 5 sibilants. Following the Samech letter, as say following the number 60, we then get to number 70. As I'm double checking everything, the number 70, Edna transcribes that with a little marker that looks like a comma, I guess. Well, she doesn't. She just simply does a little dropping. I'll show you what she does in a second. She gives the right name for it. The letter is called the ayin letter. She has both the printed Hebrew and the cursive, which is a handwriting writing of that letter. The Zion letter. The ayin letter, the ayin letter, the ayin letter. The ayin letter is a numerical value of 70. This is how I make the ayin. Again, notice I'm going in this direction. I'm not going in that direction. If you go in this direction here, you'll get the same result. The problem is it's going from left to right, where you should be going from right to left. So the ayin letter, she transcribes the ayin letter. Look at what she does. She writes just simply a marker like this. I transcribe the ayin letter like this, like this, like this. I now also want to take a look at the transcription of the Aleph letter. As I look at the Aleph letter, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, I notice that the transcription that Edna gives for the Aleph letter is identical to the transcription that she gives to the ayin. In other words, the 2 letters are transcribed the same way, which is her way of saying there's no distinctive sound. In fact, there's hardly any sound, the way we speak Hebrew today, between an aleph and ayin. And if there is a sound, it's not even noticeable given the marker is this particular marker. Or the way I put it, the ayin looks like this and the aleph looks like this. How do you read this? If you're learning Hebrew for the first time, this is a nice way of saying that the letters are silent letters. We don't have anymore a distinctive sound to them. That is why when it comes to spelling Hebrew, unless you see it in print multiple times, you're not going to be able to spell that word properly. The word that comes to mind is a monosyllabic word, properly written out, is the word Shema. Listen, hear, as in the phrase, "Hear, O Israel." How would you know how to spell Shema? You hear a sh, all right, you write a shin. You hear a shma, an M sound, all right, you write the mem sound. Then when it comes to the al letter or the al vowel, you're not quite sure whether it's a patach or whether it's a kamatz. That marker there, and that's where you have to know how to vocalize. But it's that last letter. How can I tell it's an ayin? You cannot tell. You have to see it printed out multiple times to know it's an ayin and not an aleph letter. If I write an aleph at the end, it doesn't distinguish the sound at all. It will still be Shema. Anyway, the letter ayin is written as you see it. And ayin happens to be the Hebrew word for an eye. So go back to what we said formerly in the class hour, and that is, where do letters get their names? The letters are supposed to represent something in the so-called real world of nature that you live in. And I guess if that word ayin is the name of this letter, it probably looks like an I, not the letter I, but E-Y-E. Now look at that confusion. I said the word I. Do I have in mind the word I, or do I have the subject pronoun I? And I guess if you have an imagination, you can see an I in this. I don't know. I see something that represents nothing more than a crypto belief in the Lord Jesus Christ.
Sideways.
Which is exactly what Christians who are believers see as a symbol for Jesus. It looks like this form, taking the first letter of Jesus and Christ, Lord, Messiah, whatever the phrase may be. And also the word fish is related to this word. All kinds of things can be read into and read out of. So I make a distinction. The ayin will look like this. The aleph looks like this in transcription. And then when it comes to counting of numbers, ayin aleph, ayin bet is 72. Ayin gimel, ayin dal, ayin hey, ayin vav, ayin zayin, ayin het, ayin tet, and then you get to the next letter. Of all the numbers, that number ayin is very significant. Back in the day, the number 70 is the year that one deceases, one comes to an end. What? 70 is the ultimate longevity of a person. When you're 71, it's like being 1 year old. 72, 2 years old. 73, 3 years old. And for those who are skeptical about what I said, the Hebrew Bible, its first major translation, is the language of Gentiles, of the nations. It was translated into Greek. And the translation tradition has it 72 rabbis, sages, if you will, were separated in 72 rooms and were told by the emperor, start your translation. They all began at the same time. They all ended at the same time. They all ended with the same tradition. What the hell are you talking about? These are traditions, which implies that 70 represents also the nations of the world. Well, there are more than things. I know there are more than 70 this or 70 that, but a tradition develops. So 70, Septuagint, that's that word in English, means 70.
70 people also went into Egypt.
That's right.
And
Oh, you can know about all kinds of
in
traditions. Yeah. Again, why that number 70? I don't know why. I can tell you if the accepted natural normal death back in the days, 2,000 years ago, said to be the 30s, then it's like double existence. I mean, Jesus, according to their tradition, was executed 33, 34, 35. We have our hero living to 120. That's off the chart. And to this very day, that number 70 plays a role among Ashkenazi Jews. The Sephardim don't know for this. At my 83rd birthday, if I followed the Ashkenazi tradition, I should have had my second bar mitzvah. The first one was at 13.
Yeah, you could have your second one at
At 83.
At a Sephardic synagogue.
At 83?
Yeah.
Or the Sephardim are picking up from the Ashkenazi. It's a tradition. Only this time there's wisdom to it. The first time around, you don't know what the hell you were doing. This time at 83, a little wisdom has entered you. You now know how to give a proper Dvar Torah or proper Aliyah. That's the beauty of seeing something, remembering something, and observing, but adding or subtracting will make it relevant for you now. Okay, as I now continue, and notice what I'm doing. I'm not using my memory. I'm double, triple checking, and you'll see why I'm doing this when I finish the alphabet. The next letter is the letter Pei. The letter Pei, the equivalent value there is number 80, and she puts down both Pei and the Fei. Okay, so far letters that we've seen where two letters are given. Following Garber's tradition, the bet, the vet, the gimel, and the gimel, the daled and the daled, the kaf and the haf. So far we have 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we're picking up with the pay letter. Well, before I do that, you have the mem letter. No, we're talking about just the bigger kefal letters, the bigger kefat. Okay, the next one is the pay letter. That's what we're doing right now. Edna writes both the pay letter and the fey. She has one with a dot and says the sound is that of a P, and one the fey, the sound is that of an F. If that's so, then this is bilabial, pa, pa, and the labial dental. Remember the V sound and the F sound? Well, that's the fey letter. And I guess what you need to know is how come with the kaf and the pay she does show the two different letters, and the bet the vet she does show the two letters, but she does not with the gimel and the dalet, because they're no longer functional as far as Israeli Hebrew goes today. But we write it out because it's part of Hebrew grammar. Okay, the pay letter. The pay, the equivalent would be that of 80, right? Pay Aleph, pay Bet, pay Gimel, pay Dalet, pay Hey, pay Vav, pay Zion, pay Het, pay Tet. Nothing special about that. I then go on to the next letter. As I'm double checking everything, the next letter, the equivalent of 90, is a letter known as the Tzadi. The Tzadi letter. The Tzadi. The Tzadi letter has a particular writing about it. For most people, the Tzadi letter is a letter that looks like the number 3. The Tzadi. And when you see it executed on the board, it looks like the number 3. The problem with people is the pronunciation. The Tzadi, or the name of this letter, it's not called the Tzadik, it's called the Tzadi. The TS, the A, the D, and the I. Do not call the letter with the letter K at the end. Tzaddik by itself means the righteous letter. This is not righteous. It's like any other letter. It's important, but it's not righteous. And the reason for the kuf at the end is because the next letter of the Hebrew alphabet happens to be that K letter. When people confuse it, they call it another tzaddik, the tzaddik letter. At least the Ashkenazim make that confusion. The tzadi is the number 90. Tzadi Aleph, Tzadi Bet, Tzadi Gimel. When I come to Tzadi Gimel, it brings me to an article I once wrote. 93. An unusual story that made the headlines in the New York Times back in the day of World War II. Of 93 religious Jewish girls who went to a religious Orthodox school who chose not to be taken as harlots by the Nazis. And the night before their harlotry to be, they committed suicide by taking poison. There are streets in Israel that have that number. The girls are the 93. How true is the story? It's interpreted differently. Lucy Davidowitz, one of the great historians of World War II, basically cites that story as fabrication. But the story, my dear friends, comes not from liberal Jews. It comes from the Orthodox Agudas Yisrael movement. And the girls are said to belong to the Beit Yaakov movement, which is religious Orthodox yeshiva for girls. And now think for a moment, why the number 93? What's so special about 93? Well, the number 90 sounds like the word righteous. And the number 3 happens to be synonymous with obligatory commandments required of women, but not of men. Are you aware of this? There are all positive commandments that women are not expected to do. There are all negative commandments which women and men are obligated to do. And then there are several actions that a male is not obligated, but a woman is. 3 of them. One is the mikvah, ritual bath. The other is make a halal for Shabbat. And the third one, as I'm thinking now, the mikvah.
What was it? Mikvah, the dough, and wasn't it the nida? No, mikvah.
Yeah, well, the mikvah is the
dough,
nida.
the
One
tithe.
second. Well, 1 minute. 1 minute. The lighting of the candles. The lighting of the candles for Shabbat, it's extended for holidays. They wrote Shabbat, that's a woman's obligation. The making of the halal for Shabbat, she's able to do that. And then the monthly visit to the mikvah before she can have conjugal relations with her companion or with her husband. Anyway, just the theory of why 3 and then the theory of why 90. But it's a fascinating episode. The New York Times wrote it up as an actual episode that occurred And what my good friend Baruch and everybody else who's listening to me now do not know, the person who generated that story to be picked up by the New York Times was not some saintly rabbi. It was probably the most secular Yiddish writer of their time. Are you ready for the name? Shalom Ash, a great Yiddish novelist, not at all, to my knowledge, religiously oriented, believed in this story, or at least he portrayed it that way. Anyway, the 93. The article I wrote about them is found in my book called Shoah the Paradigmatic Genocide. It came out in the 1990s. Okay, as we now continue with the number 90, we then go on to the next four letters. The letter that has the numerical value of 100 is called the Kuf letter. And watch now the problem. As I continue to write my letters, let's write down the letter Tzadi and then the Kuf letter. The Kuf letter looks like this, the Kuf letter. Its transcription is a K with a dot under it. The sound of the Kuf letter is no longer distinguishable from the Kaf letter. Both the Kaf and the Kuf are sounded the same way today. Edna Coffin, let's see what she does. For the number 20, she puts for transcription the letter K. And then for the number 12, for the number 100, she puts for the transcription the letter K. See what I'm getting at? Edna Coffin uses the same transcription for both the Kuf letter and for the Kaf letter. Why so? Because they both are pronounced the same way today. Garber follows another method. He follows the academic one. This is a K, and this is a K with a dot under it. This is more an emphatic K, which is no longer emphasized. But still, it's a distinctive sound. And then when it comes to writing Hebrew, how would you know if it's only a K sound, or it's a Kaf that's called for a Kuf letter? You cannot just simply write what you hear. You have to write the proper spelling. And take that word for righteous person. That word tzadi, tzadi. And now tzaddik. How do I know it's a Kuf letter at the end? Maybe it's a Kaf letter at the end. You don't. That's why you need to know the spelling, even though you don't make a distinction anymore in the sound. This is called the Kuf letter. And its proper transcription, K with a dot under it. Or as we continue, the last four letters of the Hebrew alphabet is the next letter, the letter Resh. The letter Resh. The transcription is an R. That's the equivalent of 200, I guess. And then you have the Shin letter that follows, the Shin letter. Notice I make it as a Shin with a dot to the right. Let me double check what Edna does and basically ask the question, if there's a Shin letter, what about the Sin letter? And notice what Edna does. She puts SH, and then she has a semicolon, and she puts an S. You see what she does? The letter Shin is also going to be interchangeable with the letter Sin. And when you write without specific markers, you make a marker like this. When you write with academics in mind, the Shin should have a dot to the right, and the Sin should have a dot to the left. So the numerical value of number 300 is, or the Hebrew writing of it, is both a Shin, which alternates with a Sin. She shows that by putting an SH and by putting an S. By putting an S by itself, it looks like the letter Samach. That's the same letter she uses to transcribe the Samach. That's the problem when you have Israeli Hebrew interchangeable with academic Hebrew. Make a distinction. The Samach itself should be an S. The Sin should be an S with a marker like that. And the Shin should be an S with a marker like that. Now, at least you have three different signs that will help you. And then finally, the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The last letter is called the Tav letter. The Tav letter. And notice I'm writing the Tav with a dot, I'm writing the tav without a dot. Edna Coffin only writes one tav. She does not bother to write the two tavs. Again, Israeli Hebrew no longer makes a distinction between a tav with a dot and a tav without a dot. They both are pronounced the same way. The fact that I make a distinction implies that there is a distinction in sound. The gimel and the dalet you can't tell anymore. Same thing true with the tav. If I see a tav letter with or without a dot, it's a T sound. But one is a letter T and one is a T with a marker like that under it, implying it's not a regular T, it's a T that's continuous. And then the Ashkenazim come in on this. The Ashkenazim have no problem making a distinction. They see a tav with a dot, they pronounce it a T. They see a tav without a dot, they pronounce it as an S. They pronounce it as an S. So, for example, if I have the word Torah, I know this is very complicated, but it's necessary. That tav beginning a word is always plosive. If I have the word Torah of, and the word is Torat, notice how I'm sounding it. Torat, Torah. The Ashkenazim would say Toras. Without the dot in that tav, they pronounce that tav as an S sound. The Torah of Moshe, Toras Moshe. Sfaradim say Torat, Torat. They don't say Toras. And that's another problem. You speak Ashkenazi Hebrew, you land in Israel, you settle in Israel, you're going to have to shift your Ashkenazi pronunciation to a Sephardic one. But all this comes with experience. Okay, with that said and done, we now have other things to go into. I would like to go into the 6 letters that have the dot and without the dot. These are known as the Beged Kefet letters. 6 letters, the Bet, the Gimel, the Dalet, the Kav, the Pei, and the Tav. When you see them with a dot, they have one sound. When you see these letters without a dot, they have another sound. The Bet letter shows that with the Vet. The Kaf letter shows that with the Chaf. The Pei letter shows that with the Fei. But the Gimel, the Dalet, and the Tav, as far as Israeli pronunciation goes today, there's no longer distinction between the dot in that letter and the dot without the letter. The letter without the dot. So why is it important for us now? When it comes to Hebrew grammar and you're told to write with vowels, you're going to have to know when to put a dot in those letters and when you don't put a dot in the letters. So, for example, these 6 letters, when they start a word, are always with a dot in the letters. No Hebrew word begins with a vet. It's always with a bet. No Hebrew word begins with a gimel, dalet, or tav without a dot if it's the first letter of the word.
So when it has a dot in the middle of it, if it not being the first word, that means emphasis on the word?
Okay, if there's a dot in the middle of the word, if the letter is in the middle of the word, and if there's a dot in that letter, it depends on whether it's a light dot, which this is called, or a dot that's found with almost all Hebrew letters called a strong dot, the Dagesh Chazak.
What? That's in
That's,
the letter of time?
this is the Dagesh Kal.
Oh,
We haven't done any syllabication. I'm just trying to show the letters as is. Let's keep it. And what Baruch is asking is, in the middle of a word, you'll have the so-called light dot, Dagesh Kal, if the letter, Beged Kefet letter, follows a consonant, meaning there's a vowel not before it, but a consonant before it. If it follows a vowel, it's not necessarily going to have a dot in it. If it does, it could be the other dot called a strong dot. Let me give you an example. The word for sacrifice, the proper reading for an offering. Watch the way I'm spelling the word. You see I'm putting a dot in that letter? This happens to be a short kamat. We don't know the vowels yet. A short kamat's closed syllable, consonant, vowel, and a closing feature in Hebrew. One of the 2 ways to close a syllable is to write these two dots here, what's called a schwa, under the letter that follows the short vowel. But that same marker can also have a sound to it. Again, that's more Hebrew. Well, let's assume it's a silent schwa. I don't have to write it, but Hebrew has a tradition of every letter should have something accompanying it. If I write it like this, you can almost see that this letter is following a consonant. This is not a vowel. This is a marker of silence, the shvanach. That dot now in that bet letter is a dagesh kal. If this were a gimel, it'll take a dot. If this were a dalet, it'll take a dot. It's called the light dot. And we refer to the 6 letters as the Bega Kefet. It's just simply a way to remember the letters. And this guy we pronounce as an F sound, Bega Kefet, or Begat Kafat. Okay, now there's one other aspect of the Hebrew alphabet that needs to be said right now. There are 5 letters of the Hebrew alphabet which are written differently if they occur as the last letter of a word, whether they occur as a last letter or a frontal or medial letter. And so we begin. The letter Kaf letter as a final letter in the word is written like this. The final Kaf is written as you see it. I make the Kaf letter, watch what I'm doing. I drop a line and I put 2 dots alongside the bar. Why the 2 dots? I'll explain soon. This does not occur as a frontal or medial letter. It occurs as the last letter of the word. The Kaf is one of the 5 letters. I then continue the letter Mem. The letter Mem in a frontal position, in a medial position, looks like this. As a final letter, the Mem looks like this. It's the same letter, it's just that in the final position, we write it differently. The 3rd letter is the letter Nun. In a frontal medial position, it looks like this. As a final letter, it looks like this. And it's that letter Nun that causes the final half to be written this way. What do you mean? Back in the day, a final half and a final Nun look something like this. They look very similar. And if they look similar, they got interchanged. And so a tradition developed to make sure if it's a final half letter, you put 2 dots like this by the bar of the final half to distinguish it from a final Nun. Today, I can see no problem. But back in the day, they all apparently look the same. And I've seen ancient manuscripts, Dead Sea Scrolls, that indeed show that problem. So a final half, a final Mem, a final Nun. Let me double check to make sure we don't make an error here. The letters that we have, the final half letter, the final Mem letter, the final Nun letter, and now we come to the Pei letter. The Pei letter. The Pei letter in a frontal and medial position. The Pei letter looks like this. In a frontal or medial position. And in a final position, the final Fei. Notice what I'm doing. I'm making a lamed. I cross over like this. Back in my day, a final Fei looked like this as well. This is more obsolete. This is more the contemporary way of writing the final Fei. And then finally, the Tzadi. The Tzadi letter in a frontal and medial position looks like this. In a final position, looks like this. Again, make sure you distinguish between a final Tzadi and a final Fei. So 5.
So similar.
Excuse me?
They look very similar.
very similar.
They look alike.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. And it's also difficult to make. You know, the final Fe letter, I guess, is not so hard, but the Tzadi, you gotta go like that. And when you see Hebrew, the printed Hebrew is also the same. 5 letters that stand out this way.
One thing that I was hoping might be helpful if you erase the board and go through the handwriting so people could see how the Hebrew is written from right to left in that. So you had mentioned that the other day, so if you would be so kind to do
Would you
that.
want me to do the whole alphabet right now?
Yeah, please. So people would have an idea how to do, because I have a problem with it. And
Okay.
I've really gotten to it. You've seen the letters I give you, like,
All right. What we'll do now, the request is to write the Hebrew alphabet. I will write them with the Beka Kefa letters, being 2 letters. I would write them with the final letters as well, which is, whatever letters get a final position to it. All right, people, just bear with me on this one. The first letter is called the Aleph letter. The next is the Bet and the Vet. The Gimel and the Gimel without the dots. The Dalid and the Dalid without the dots. Then the Hey letter. Then the Vav letter. The Zion, the Het, the Tet, and the Yud. The next letters are the Kaf letter, the Kaf without the dot in it, and the final Kaf written like this, the Lamed letter, the Mem letter, the final Mem, the Nun, the final Nun, the Samech letter, that's 40, that's 50, that's 60, and 70 will be the Ayin. And then I check my board or check my book, and the number of page should then follow. As I take a look, I see my Ayin letter, or am I seeing it correctly? Yeah, no, I did it right. Then you have the Samach, you have the Ayin letter, then the Pei letter. And without the dot in it. So this is 70, this is 80, right? That's Sadi letter, and the final Sadi, and the final Pei. What I should do is be more consistent. I got my Pei, let's just do it better over here. The letter Pei, the Fei letter, and then the final Fei, Sadi. That's 60, that's 70, 80, that's 90. The Kuf letter, right? The Shin and the Sin letter.
final Kuf.
How's that?
Is there a final Kuf?
There's no final Kuf.
Oh.
There's a final Chaf.
Oh.
I'll get to that in a second. Then you have the Reish, then you have the Tav, and the Tav without the dots. And notice what you have here, the final Chaf. The final Chaf should be a KH. The Het letter should be a CH. And the coffin, she puts for a transliteration of the Het letter an X. But in sound, they both sound the same. And that's why when I have the name Baruch, let's just take now an example of a word. In fact, we're able to write out that word Baruch now. The vowels we don't know yet. The spelling of the word for blessed is Bet, Resh, Vav, and a final Chaf. Vocalization, the Kamatz, the Resh letter has this vowel, a new sound. Transliterated, the syllables, first of all, CV and CVC. In transliteration, this is a B sound and an A. This is an R sound, this is a U, and this guy here is going to be a KH. Baruch. When some of us write a CH, that implies the word Baruch is spelled with a chet. Even though Baruch like this, it looks very nice. It's just that there's a misspelling of the letter. Do I change the spelling? No, leave it the way you have it. That's the trouble with language. What works for one person does not work for the group. What's true of the group in one generation is not going to be carried on to the next one. And she's got her own symbol. She has X letters running around, or she doesn't make a distinction. She has the same letter by several letters in transcription. Okay, I think that should take care of the vowels. No, the constants. We got to do the vowels still.
Okay, in terms of time, it's 12:56. We have the reservation till 1:30, and in the video, we're at 55 minutes and 55 seconds. Do you need a break?
Let me just take a moment break. Yeah.